So today I'm going to be comparing two budget Motorola devices that have come out in the last couple of months. I've got the Moto G14, which comes in at about 140 quid, but I've also got the Moto G54, which comes in at about 180. So I'm going to be comparing the two today and see which one will be worth buying. Is it worth paying the extra 40 quid for some improvements on the G54, or will you be okay with the G14? So let's take a look. So the design of both of these phones is very similar. Both sport an all-plastic design with a matte feel to both. I've got the G14 in sky blue, but it's also available in steel grey, buttercream and lilac purple. Whereas I've got the G54 in midnight blue, and it's also available in pearl blue and mint green. They've also got a design typical of recent Motorola's with a flat plastic side with all the usual buttons and ports, and the only difference being the 3.5mm headphone jack is on the top of the G14 but placed at the bottom of the G54. Overall, I really like the design and feel of both of the phones. The G14 is a bit lighter, coming in at just 177 grams, whereas the G54 comes in at 192. Sometimes I feel that heavier phones do feel a little bit better in the hands. It helps make the phone feel a little bit more sturdy, but to be honest, both of the phones are handled really well. They both feel great in the hands. And as with most budget phones, neither phone has an official IP rating, but they both have a water repellent coating, so if you're caught in the rain, you should be fine. And as for the displays on both of these phones, there is a lot similar here. Both are 6.5-inch 1080p IPS LCD displays, but where you're stuck with just a 60Hz display on the G14, this is boosted to a super fast 120Hz on the G54, which makes overall scrolling a lot smoother. But one thing to note with the 60Hz display on this G14 is it's actually a downgrade from the 90Hz display found on the G13. Watch out for my G13 versus G14 comparison video that'll be coming up soon. Subscribe so you don't miss that out, but that is just something to bear in mind if you're thinking of picking up this phone. So overall, both of the displays on these phones are really nice. 1080p panels, so they're plenty sharp enough. Nice natural color, but of course you don't get that usual contrast that you'll find from an OLED panel, but they're absolutely fine and they will be absolutely fine for most people. And you do get a pretty sizable chin on both phones, but this is normal for most phones at this price. Bezels around the rest of the phone are pretty slim, and you also get a modern punch hole selfie cutout instead of the dewdrop notch found on other budget phones. You get an 8-megapixel camera on the G14, and this is upgraded to a 16-megapixel camera on the G54. So overall, both phones do really well with the design and their displays. They're both modern looking, but how about performance? Well, to be honest, this is where the G54 widens the gap. While the G14 offers pretty decent basic performance from its 12nm Unisoc Tiger T616 processor, the G54 steps it up with a 6nm Dimensity 7020 processor, and this, thanks to the 6nm process node, offers improved efficiency and also performance both from the low end and high performance cores. Now, while the T616 in the G14 offers plenty of performance, there is a couple of main drawbacks. The first being that it's a 3-year-old chip in a new phone, and also there's no 5G support. So that's a couple of things to note when you're thinking of the performance of the G14. And pair that with the only RAM option of just 4GB, which, while the norm for most budget phones, this will hinder heavy multitasking and gaming. The 128GB of base storage though should be enough for games, photos and videos, etc. Now the G54 doubles the base RAM to 8GB with 128GB of storage, and of course both phones offer micro SD card support if you want to expand that storage. And you do get large 5000 mAh batteries on both of these phones, but unfortunately charging speeds are pretty mediocre at just 15 watts on both of these phones. And as for software, you do get Android 13 out of the box on both of these phones, and you're likely to get Android 14, but then Motorola don't have the best track record for software updates, so Android 14 might be the last update that you get. And as usual, you get a stock Android experience with very little bloatware. You do get a couple of Motorola's own apps to help with customizations to make your phone look how you want it to look with fonts and themes, etc. And of course, overall scrolling on the G54 feels a lot smoother thanks to that 120Hz display, but to be honest, the overall experience on the G14 is pretty great as well. And lastly, onto the cameras of both of these phones, and this is where the setups are very similar. You get a 50-megapixel primary camera with an f1.8 aperture, but only the G54 has optical image stabilization, and the second camera is just a basic macro camera found on many other budget phones. And this is often accompanied by either a 5 or an 8-megapixel ultra-wide on a lot of other budget phones in this price, but unfortunately this is absent on both of these devices. And photo quality from both phones is very similar to what you'll find on other Motorola's at this price. A good amount of detail, but often losing this around the edges and in finer areas. And colour reproduction is natural looking with no oversaturating, something I'm definitely a fan of. And with close-up shots of objects like flowers, you get nice natural depth of field thanks to the f1.8 aperture, and portrait mode offers good subject separation thanks to using that extra lens as a depth sensor. Now that's my quick comparison between the Motorola G14 and the Motorola G54. Now personally, I've been using the G54 for a little bit longer than what I've been using the G14, and I found the G54 to be an absolutely great phone to use. The 120Hz display is really smooth, the camera's pretty decent, the display is nice, battery life is great. Of course, battery life is great on the G14 as well. I personally think spend the extra 40 quid and get the G54 because you're getting much improved performance, 5G, and of course you get that 120Hz display. But of course the G14 is still great. If you don't have the budget to go that little bit further, the G14 is absolutely fine and I don't think you'll regret it. But of course, let me know down in the comments what you think of both of these phones. Which one would you consider buying? And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future videos, of course, including the G14 versus G13 video. I'm also going to work on G54 versus the older G53 video as well. So subscribe so you don't miss those, and I'll see you in the next video.